I actually grew up in an atheist home. No one in my family growing up was a Christian. If I would ask my dad about faith and about religion, and he used to tell me that that wasn't for us. He said that that religion was necessary because it kind of helped to control the masses, but that we were a family of education, that we could rise above that, and that I would be smart enough to see once I got older that I didn't need that. And so I grew up that way, went to college on a scholarship, came home, got married, had 2 kids, bought a house with a pool and all that fun stuff, moved back to Venice and thought that I was living the dream. And what happened was that a slow, steady, the only way I can explain it, kind of darkness started to come over me. I constantly felt alone. I constantly felt like something was missing. I always felt like I was meant to do something else and I had somehow missed the mark. Found myself in the middle of a alcohol addiction that started to tear down everything that I had built up that was bringing me a little bit of happiness. And I started to lose friendships and relationships. I started to break down connections with my family. I eventually ended up getting arrested, losing my job, and long story short, I came home one day and my wife had left. I threw my arms up and I looked up at the sky and said, "Well, God, what am I supposed to do now?" And I didn't realize it at the time. A pastor pointed out to me years later that that was actually the first time I ever prayed. That weekend, my best friend that I grew up with my whole life, that I've been best friends with since middle school, moved home from Colorado. He had moved out there after high school, and he was up to speed on kind of what was going on and was coming over to cheer me up, and kind of in just recognition of what I was going through, he said, "Man, I know you don't do the whole church thing or really, do the God thing, but I heard of this new church in Venice. Why don't you come? Why don't we go to church this weekend? What do you have to lose?" And so I walked out of the service, several hundred people walking out. The pastor was in the back doing what pastors do, shaking hands and kissing babies. And as I was walking out in the crowd, he pointed me out and he asked if he could reach out to me. And at the time, I just wanted to get out of that conversation badly. So I gave him my phone number and I left. And he called me the next day. And if I'm completely honest, he invited me to lunch. And I accepted mainly because I was just kind of financially strapped and I could use the free lunch. He said, "I'm going to make a commitment to you. I'm going to offer you an opportunity to meet once a week. We'll meet here in my office and we'll talk about all the stuff that you've got going on in your life. But then we're also going to talk a little bit about the Bible." And then he asked me if we could pray together. And I told him that I'd never prayed before. And he said, "That's okay. Well, you just repeat after me." And so we prayed a prayer that I didn't really realize was a salvation prayer. Afterwards, I remember looking up at him and I said something to the matter of, "Did you just do that Jesus thing on me?" And he kind of laughed and said, "I guess we'll find out, won't we?" And what started out as a whole lot of really me placing blame, talking about how wronged I'd been, about how jacked up my parents were, and about how if I would have grown up in a different setting, and if my parents wouldn't have gotten divorced, and if maybe my friends and family would have been a little more faithful to me and my needs, and then we would talk a little bit about the Bible. And then it progressed more into more of us talking about the Bible, because what happened is that the Bible started to speak directly into my life. I was still at a very defensive season, and so I even at one point came in and I pointed at him and I said, "Are you picking the parts of the Bible to give me to read based on the private information that I'm giving you? Because I feel like you're trying to Jedi mind trick me, because I go home and I read the Bible and it basically is just exactly about what we're talking about, and I feel like you're trying to trick me." And he laughed. That was my first lesson on the power of the living Word of God and how it will speak into your life if you'll let it. And my life began to change. And don't get me wrong, my problems didn't go away. The difficulty of my life and the situation that I had brought myself to didn't go away. About a year or so into that process, I came one day to visit him, and he had a present for me. I opened it up, and it was a Bible. It was a study Bible. It's the Bible that I still read into this day. And I asked him what it was for, and he said, well, as of today, you've read the entire New Testament. And he stood there and he looked at me and he said, Andy, the guy who stood here about a year ago and told me that he didn't believe in God, I believe has been transformed into a new creation. And I believe that God has forged us together for a reason. He said, I think that God's calling you. He said, I think he's calling you to be a witness and an example of the transformative power of Christ when you give your life over. It's been almost 10 years since that meeting with that pastor. The incredible part of that story today is that pastor was actually Pastor Matt, and that church was the Bridge Church. But over these 10 years, I've had the opportunity to lead my entire family to Christ. My little sister on an Easter Sunday, my little brother on an Easter Sunday, my mom, got baptized with my mom, and I've even had the opportunity to lead my dad to the Lord. I've met my beautiful wife and married her, my Christy, and we have 4 kids between the two of us. And life isn't perfect, but life has purpose. And in my mind, that's why God is calling us. That's why maybe some of us are here in church today, is it's because God has a purpose for each and every one of us. And more often than not, he's just waiting for a decision, just waiting for us to decide that we want that purpose. And it's in that decision that God comes in and your life can be changed. And I truly believe that that is the message of Easter, that old things can die and new things can come if we're willing to give our lives to Jesus today. Hi, I'm Andy Meyer, and this is my Easter story.